Hi girls, it's Miss O'Brien again. We're going to continue on with chapter 3. So this is section 2, shifts in the demand curve. So let's get started. So you're home on a rainy day and you get the following text, raining too hard, not going out. So what does this have to do with with economics, Mrs. O'Brien? But, sometimes increase or decreases in demand are not connected to price. So in the first lesson that we went through together, we connected, prices increase, demand decreases, and vice versa. But you know what? Sometimes it has to do with something else. So, if it is a rainy night, your demand for burgers at Kettle Black at any price has dropped, but your demand for Pronto Pizza delivery has greatly increased. Why? You don't want to go outside. It's miserable, right? So, your demand for takeout, in this case Pronto, has gone up. So a demand curve, again, that we looked at in section 1, is accurate as long as the ceteris paribus assumption is true. And what ceteris paribus means is that all other things held constant. Okay, so when you think back to the chart we looked at for individual demand and market demand, that demand for pizza, like each slice at $1, $2, $3, up to $6, that only took into account quantity and price. But let's face it, there's thousands of other factors that could change the demand curve. So in this lesson, we're going to go through some of the things that could do just that. So when we allow other factors to change, we no longer move along the demand curve. So instead, the entire demand curve shifts. So again, if we have one demand curve in place for the price and quantity of slices of pizza, and then another factor is thrown into that mix, the curve shifts. You can no longer look at your original demand curve, okay? So a shift in the demand curve means that at every price, consumers buy a different quantity than before. So economists also call this a change in demand. And we'll go through some examples next. But just remember that, it's not always just about price and quantity. There's also other things that can make it shift. So when something affects the demand for an item at all prices, you're going to see a shift in the curve. So if you look at this very, savvy graphic here, so you have price on the y-axis, quantity demanded on the x-axis. So here's your original demand, D1, okay? So if this is your original demand and it shifts to the right to D2, that means there's an increase in the demand at all prices. So this is your original demand curve, and then it shifts to your new demand curve. So it's shifting to the right, there's an increase in demand. And again, we'll go through examples next. If there's a shift to the left, so the inverse is true. Oops, sorry, girls. Then there's a decrease in demand, right? So the quantity demanded was once all the way out here, right? Say this is like, 500 jean jackets demanded. All of a sudden, it shifts to the left. Now you're at, 300 jean jackets demanded. So shift to the left means there's a decrease in demand. Shift to the right, increase in demand. So let's go through some examples together, which will hopefully help explain this theory. So there's a shortage of hamburger meat from cows, right? I don't know, there's some sort of mad cow disease. There's not as many cows, so there's not as much hamburger meat getting to the supermarket, Stop and Shop, McDonald's, Chili's, Five Guys, etc. So how is this shortage of hamburger meat going to affect the beef industry across the board? Okay, so how do you think this is going to affect demand? I'll give you a second to think about it. And when you're thinking about it, how is that going to affect the price of that hamburger or the price of beef? So here is your original demand curve of hamburger meat, and it's going to go to the left, right? The quantity demanded will decrease because the price of that beef is going to increase. If it's harder to get hamburger meat in your store, in McDonald's, in Five Guys, etc., they're going to charge more. Okay? So if demand decreases, just remember, then the demand is going to shift to the left and decrease. There's a shortage of beef, right? The price is going to increase. Our second example, technology is used to develop robots to help car manufacturers make more cars. So how do you think this will now shift the demand curve? Will it shift it to the right or left, the demand for new cars? So this will actually shift the demand curve to the right. I hope you were thinking about that and got the right answer. Because if technology is helping the process, increase in technology usually lowers the price of manufacturing. So if it's cheaper now to make cars, right, that price will be passed on to the consumer and your demand will go to the right. So it'll increase. So if this is, 10,000 cars demanded a month, now it's going to go up to 13,000 cars demanded in a month. Okay, so just remember that the demand curve will shift to the right. So an increase in demand. Okay, so again, there's certain things besides price that will affect the demand of a good or service. And we're going to go through a couple of them now. So they're called non-price determinants, just like we said in the beginning of the video, or I said in the beginning of the video, that, if it's really rainy, you're going to, your demand for takeout is going to increase, right? So let's go through some of these other non-price determinants together. Change in income, consumer expectations, population, demographics, consumer taste, and advertising. So the first one is a change in income. So your income, which means your salary, so how much money you're taking home each month, each year, affects your demand for most goods. Okay? So most items you purchase are normal goods. And that just means they're goods that consumers demand more of when their income rises. Okay? So if your income increases, you are most likely going to have an increase of purchases of normal goods, right? When your income rises, you're going to buy more. Okay, if something is considered an inferior good, that's a good that you would buy in smaller quantities or not at all if your income were to rise and you could afford something better. Okay, so now you're making more money, so you're going to buy less of an inferior good. So a good example is like a used car. If you're making, it's $40,000 a year and all of a sudden you're making $75,000 a year, you are more likely to buy a new car rather than a used car. Or, if you go to the supermarket and you're in the cereal aisle, there'll be generic cereal. So like the Stop and Shop brand of cereal of like, Toasted Oats instead of Cheerios. That's considered an inferior good. If your income is smaller, you're more likely to buy an inferior good. If you're making more money, you're less likely to buy that. You'll splurge on the Cheerios. Consumer expectations, so our expectation about what the future is going to bring about, can also affect our demand for certain goods today. So I say this to you girls in class all the time. Economics is really just about decisions that we make. And a lot of it's just common sense. So hopefully a lot of these ideas that I'm mentioning, and hopefully I'm not talking too fast, are clicking for you. So, suppose you've had your eye on a new purchase. In this case, you're, looking to buy a new bike. You've been watching, bike sales and for months, and you walk into the bike shop one weekend and the owner tells you that the price of the bike will go up in 1 week. Once the owner tells you that, would that change your decision to buy the bike? We should all say yes, right? Your immediate demand for the bike increases, right? You feel that urgency to buy the bike this weekend before the price goes up. So your expectation about the future, about that price increase, can absolutely affect your demand for a certain good. Okay? And the reverse is true as well. So what if the shopkeeper tells you the bike will be on sale next week? Okay? You walk in on a Saturday, the owner says this same bike that you're looking at will be 20% off on Wednesday. Your demand is going to fall to zero. You're a fool if you buy that bike on Saturday, right? If you just wait 3 more days, go to the same store, you'll be able to get your bike for 20% cheaper on Wednesday. Okay, a few more items to go through. So population can affect demand for certain items. So a rise in population will increase demand for houses, food, and many other goods and services, right? If more and more people move into a certain community, neighborhood, city, you need a lot of more goods and services, right? You need more banks, you need more grocery stores, you need more auto mechanics, you need more hair salons to service all the people that have suddenly moved into that one area. So this was seen post-World War II. All of the men came home from war and they all, settled down, had families, had babies, and there was a huge increase for certain goods and services because all of a sudden you had this whole large generation of new babies that then became children and teenagers and adults. And so, in the 1940s to 60s, they needed new schools to accommodate all the children that were school age. And then as time went on, there was eventually a need for senior citizen services as that boomer generation aged. So again, this change in demand has nothing to do with price, but rather population. And just think about it at terms of like Notre Dame. So we're about, 400 and I'm going to take a guess, 425 students at Notre Dame. If all of a sudden our population increased to 700 students at Notre Dame, what would we need more of? So just think about it for a second, right? We need more teachers, right? We need more classrooms. We would need more food in the cafeteria every day for lunch. We'd probably need more lunch ladies. We'd need more tables in the cafeteria, right? So that increase in the student population would absolutely affect the demand for certain goods at Notre Dame. And demographics. So if you've never heard of this term before, demographics are statistical characteristics of populations. So just simply means your age, race, gender, occupation, income level. So you, as a senior in high school, your demographic is, are you all 17, 18-year-old? That's a statistical characteristic that suits you. So again, your race, you're all women, right? So you're all female. That's part of the demographics. So all of that, when all demographics affects packaging of goods, pricing of goods, advertising of a product. So, you are exposed to advertising media all day long, right? And so much of what you see on your screen, on your phone, on your TV is appealing to certain demographics. So this is just one example, but Hispanic Americans will make up 29% of the US population by 2050. So there's more and more, again, media advertising tailored to that demographic of Hispanic Americans because that population is growing. Okay, so businesses want to capitalize on that. So these are just some fun advertisements that I have, Diet Pepsi with oh gosh, Sophia, oh gosh, girls, what's her name? Sophia, from Modern Family, right? So that ad could be appealing to the Hispanic culture, right? The ad is in Spanish. This one is the dollar menu. Looks good here. So that demographic could also be appealing to those of a lower income, right? Your money will go a long way. If you come to come to McDonald's, you can get all of these great deals. Okay, we'll take a pause. Do you hear the music? That's my cuckoo clock in my house. To get a little entertainment here with these videos. All right. What else? Ooh, went too far. So these are Gatorade advertisements, right? So if you see, they're all actually different. Football, soccer. These are all different athletes. Gatorade always wins. So, these could be tailored towards athletes, obviously that demographic. But, I mean, we could go on and on and on about social media targeting ads to certain demographics. And I think we should all be, realizing that is absolutely happening on your phones, on your Facebook feeds, on your Instagram feed, etc. So an additional thing that can affect demand for certain objects or goods or services is advertising. So again, the fact that advertising has heavily shifted to social media platforms, this has obviously affected how companies advertise. And I mean, companies spend more and more and more money on social media advertising because they can connect with consumers on a personal level while promoting their products and brand name. So these are taken from my Instagram feed, right? So I was scrolling through my Instagram feed and I had a Shop Disney. So that's absolutely tailored to me. I'm a Disney fan. I vacation at Disney. My children love Disney. I have young children. So that is absolutely in my Instagram feed for a reason, right? You girls probably wouldn't have a Disney ad, or some of you may, if there's other Disney lovers out there, in your Instagram feed. I also had a Fathead. I don't know what the Fathead is for, but I don't know. I had children. Maybe I would make a Fathead of my children for a sports event. But, if we were in class together, I would ask you girls what comes up on your social media feeds. And my guess is a lot of makeup ads, perhaps prom dresses around this season, hair products, your teenagers, your teenage girls, what advertisers are trying to target you. And those are often the responses that I got: makeup, etc. And then lastly, one thing that could also affect the demand of a product is the price of a related good. So the demand curve for one good, right, can also shift in response to a change in the demand for another good. So there's two types of related goods that interact this way. So one are called complements. So if something complements each other, like they work together. So there are two goods that are bought and used together. So a really, really simple example is skis and ski boots, right? You can't have skis without ski boots. Like one needs the other to function. Also a kayak, right? If you buy a kayak, you have to buy the paddle to go with it. So try to think of some other ideas, girls, like a phone and a phone charger. Things that phone won't work without the charger eventually. So they complement each other. You need to buy both. Substitutes are goods that are used in place of one another. So if skiing is all the rage this season and we're all buying skis and ski boots, then perhaps we're not buying snowboards, right? Because the trend now is to be a skier, not a snowboarder, right? So that would be considered a substitute product. You can think of it like an iPhone and an Android, right? If I have an iPhone, I'm not buying the Samsung Galaxy, right? Those would be substitutes. You're just going to choose one item. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So that finishes section 2. It was a little longer than I anticipated. So I hope that, again, a lot of this made sense to you. A lot of it, I think, is common sense when it comes to demand. And again, you make these decisions every single day, girls. Like, are you going to spend $4.50 at Starbucks for a latte, or are you going to go to the deli and get a coffee for $1.50, right? Because that price is cheaper. You know, you're going to buy that coffee instead. So again, I hope this is making sense. You know, feel free to email me or comment if it's not, and we'll be back for the next lesson, lesson 3, which is elasticity of demand.